Hi, my name's Mike. Welcome to my channel, and today we'll be making Custodes and clickbait. So what is my secret weapon for doing Custodes quickly? Is it perhaps GW's Retributor Armor Spray Can? Fuck no, get that shit out of here. It's actually going to be Design Master's Antique Gold Spray Can, which is not, of course, designed for miniatures, but can be used on such things as flowers, paper, foam board, ribbon, wicker, pottery, and most paintable surfaces. It says not for vinyl or latex coated items, but on miniatures, I found this works really well, and now we're going to go through how I used it. So as a side note, I don't think all GW sprays are bad. Personally, I use Wraithbone a fair amount, so the spray can of Wraithbone works very well for me. It goes on smoothly, I've had no issues with it, and I'm glad I bought it. However, the Retributor Armor spray can has a number of issues. First being that it really doesn't match the color of Retributor Gold that comes out of the paint pot, as you can see on the screen. So out of the pot, Retributor Armor is a really good, lovely warm gold. I use it all the time, I recommend it. But the spray can really doesn't match the same shade, which most likely has to do with whatever formula of chemicals they put in to make it from like paint to a spray, but it just doesn't work. And secondly, I've had a lot of issues with the spray can leaving grainy texture on the model, even in very good controlled environments where other spray cans don't dry in midair. So that's been a consistent problem. Now, Design Master Gold has worked extremely well for me, even directly on plastic in those same environments. It goes on smoothly and looks lovely. I think it's great. So I'll show you a current work in progress mini. So I've used that gold directly on it. You can see it's kind of a bright, buttery cold gold. It still looks fairly antique, but as opposed to Retributor Armor, it tends to be a little bit colder, I would say. So when I turn this model around, you can see I actually used Retributor Armor on the design on the cloak there. And you can see a little bit of difference. You know, the Retributor Armor is a little bit more reddish as opposed to that gold up there, which is the antique gold from Design Master. So I would say a couple things about using it. First off, it says 2 to 3 coats on the can. I would say, yeah, 2 to 3 at least, maybe 4 or so. And wait a good at least 5 minutes between sprays. And the second thing is, you really need to use this in a well-ventilated area with a respirator. The fumes from this spray can are probably the worst I've had from any spray can, so protect your lungs, don't use it in any place without good airflow, and definitely put a respirator on. Fascinating footage of me spraying these miniatures. These are all gray plastic. They've been attached to this box by blue tack or with pins. I'll get my can out. I'll almost spray myself in the face there before I check my nozzle, and I'll start with the first light coat from about 12 to 14 inches away. Again, these are light coats. You don't want to soak the model in paint, and you're going to be doing them from different angles. So I'll come in from overhead this time. Next time I'll go a little bit more parallel, and that's just to get the spray paint into all the nooks and crannies and places that might be blocked from one angle or another. Now, the tricky part of using a spray can that's not from a miniature painting brand is that you have to find a color match, because you're always going to make mistakes after the fact. You're going to have to cover up little bits that get painted over, and you're going to have some issues with spray cans in general where it doesn't reach one part of the mini. I found a good color match, and I will go into that shortly. But one other thing I wanted to mention while we're in this stage is that you can see on the jet bike, parts of it are brown. Now, I tried something that didn't quite work in practice that's still good in theory. You don't have to do this, but I tried to undercoat them with a sepia ink in this case, which didn't quite adhere to the model. And I did that because I knew from underneath it would be harder to get the spray paint onto it, and also just to try and get some shadows into those crevices. Again, this is a separate step that I didn't show here because it really didn't work out. But I also want to point this out because on these YouTube videos, it's easy to get the sense that whoever did the YouTube video had everything figured out. You know, they knew whatever they were doing perfectly, and they didn't make any mistakes. But those mistakes do happen, and they just usually don't make the final cut. And I think there's pressure among creators to not make mistakes, to not show these errors. But I never want that to be a thing in my video. I always want to be able to, to make errors and to try new things creatively. And so I will continue to show these in my YouTube videos that, hey, not everything is perfect from the get-go. So here we have the miniature that's been coated with the gold and attached to a base. There's always going to be a few places that the spray paint will not catch. I'm going to point that out, and I'm going to show you how to cover them. So here on the inside of the face, and also kind of on the underside of the sword there's a few spots. There's always going to be a few more, like in the shield especially, that are hard to reach with the spray paint. So what I found as a pretty good color match is Citadel's Liberator Gold. And again, that's kind of a bright cold gold. I won't say it's an 100% color match, but it's very close. Like, I would have to get up pretty close to the miniature to see the difference. So you'll take that and you'll just cover any spot that didn't quite get hit by the spray paint. And one coat of this usually coats pretty well. As an aside here, if there's any interest in seeing a video on the lightning style bases I have this guy attached to, please leave a comment below. I've been considering doing one of those as well. This is my kind of go-to for basing any Custodes that I put up on eBay, which I've done a combat patrol in a couple boxes, just because it's thematic and it's interesting, and it allows people to kind of do their own bases on top of that if they already have an established scheme. But it's a pretty quick freehand effect that's fun to do. So I've done a few of these now, and really the shield is the place that I've had the most issue getting the spray paint into. And so I tend to do something, this is kind of an optional step, but I'll come in with actual Retributor armor and I'll just do all the shields with that, just to make sure that all the little tiny panes there get covered, and secondly, it adds a little bit of visual interest and contrast to the shields. So again, completely optional, you can do this or not, but I just come in and cover the entire shield panes with that Retributor armor. And for this I like to use the Blood Angels Red contrast paint. I think it works very well over the gold base. So we'll be doing this on the tassel of hair, on the recessed part of the pauldrons, and on the loincloth, or whatever those leather straps are hanging down. So make sure you shake up your contrast paint very well, and then wet your brush a little bit, and you're just going to be doing pretty much one thick coat for the hair. Now the tricky part about contrast is learning how much to get on your brush, and also how to kind of push it around on the model so it works well as far as recessing into the cracks. But you can use a fair amount on the hair, especially because you're not really in any sort of danger of messing up as long as you don't get it down onto the helmet. It's a pretty easy area to paint. You have to be a little bit more careful with the pauldrons, but with the hair, just kind of go crazy. Make sure you're using enough that it all gets well covered, because contrast paint kind of shrinks as it dries, I found, or at least moves away from some areas. So you want to make sure that all the areas you're covering get a really good coat of this stuff. Right, now we're going to be doing the pauldrons. You might want a little bit less on your brush for this one, but what's nice about the contrast paint is how it flows off the brush, and you can use that to kind of get it right up against those lines in the pauldron and just use the flowy nature of the paint itself to fill in all those areas. And if you screw up, it's not a big deal. Again, you can use that other gold to come back and cover it and just fix any mistakes. I know I made several mistakes, especially when I was doing this part, and I just came in later and fixed it up with the gold. No problem. You can also see here how it maintains that metallic shine underneath, which again I think looks amazing for the Custodes. And finally, you do the loincloth thing. I looked this up, and it's actually called, I believe, a patrouillas. It's Latin for something. If you know a better pronunciation of that, certainly let me know in the comments. But basically, you cover it in contrast red, the same as everything else. Do not forget to do the back side of this right here, otherwise it'll look a little bit weird. So next we're going to be putting some black down on the model. And mostly what I focus on here is there's some tactical tubes here on the sides of the helmet. And then there are some on the boots. There's also a couple I don't point out, like one connecting the weapon usually. So you could hit that up, and maybe on the front of the model. The joints are all the ribbed areas, usually in the back of the knees, back of the legs, and then sometimes on the inside of the elbows. Now, in the front of the Mini, depending on the Custodes models, you might have additional tubes, and you can also hit up those two vents there with some black. But really, I'm just going to kind of keep it simple. I'm using Abaddon black, but any black paint will work. So I would say for this one, if you want to be thorough, you probably have to examine the model a little bit carefully, because again, there's little tiny tubes all over the sky, and they're probably going to get lost in all the gold if you don't look at them pretty closely. One additional thing you could do if you want, I chose not to, is to take the handle of the weapon and paint that entirely black, and that'll help it kind of separate that out from the model. But again, that's really up to you. So next we're going to be painting the sword blade blue. So for this I did not want a contrast. I didn't want the metallic to show through. I wanted a darker blue color with solid coverage. So in this case I used Cantor blue from Citadel. In the past I've also used things such as Chimera blue. But really, I wanted a darker blue because I wanted the option in the future to come in and add edge highlights, lightning effects, whatnot. And personally I find it much easier to work from dark to light in these cases. So whatever weapon you happen to have, just put on a couple thin coats of dark blue and you should be done. Now if you want to see me paint lightning effects, edge highlights, and stuff on power weapons in a future video, I'll be glad to do it. Just comment somewhere down below. Alright, so our final step is a gem hunt, which is always fun on these guys because they vary quite a bit as to how many gems they have and where. Since I'm going for more of a regal theme, I chose to do a purple, in this case Xurius purple, to separate them from the rest of the elements. And you'll want to look on the helmet, the chest, the shield, the pauldrons, which I believe vary the most of any element as to how many gems they have and where they are. But there's also a couple hidden spots you want to check. So check those thigh plates that are covering each side of them, and also check on the elbow plates. The elbow plate ones are usually fairly covered. If you can see it, maybe add a little bit of purple to it. And there's one other spot that I didn't point out, but on some of the weapons they have a cross that has a little tiny thing in the center of it that could be painted as a gem. So at this point you actually do have a fully painted, tabletop ready model. It's got 3 colors on it. But I find that adding in a little bit of color to the gems is a fairly quick process to do for most of these guys, and just gives them a little bit of extra color and pop. So go through, add just like a dab of purple to each little spot, do 1 to 2 thin coats, and you should be done with your Custodes for now. So here's the final product, ready to run in and destroy your enemies in the name of the Emperor, but also ready to be improved upon past tabletop level in the future. So if you'd like to see a video on that, on the bases, or anything else I do, please comment below and subscribe. I'm not sure when I'll put out the next video, but I'm trying to do more this year. In any case, thank you for watching, I appreciate it, and enjoy your time painting.